Tirunaidu, I think this is. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Namaste. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, good night, or good morning to all of you. We are so pleased to have people in this meeting from all parts of the world in different time zones. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad and Tobago, a teacher for the past 17 years. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the 237th edition of our ICC Thought Leaders Forum. We wish to sincerely thank all of you who have contributed in whatever way to the success of this ongoing Pan-Indo-Caribbean and Pan-Indian Diaspora Global Project. For 236 unbroken continuous weeks, we have been here every single Sunday. And in the past 4 years, 6 months, and 1 week, we have featured 1,073 presenters from all parts of the world, speaking on 236 topics. Ladies and gentlemen, this is a weekly forum being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, a legally registered research and publishing company operating since 2010. And ladies and gentlemen, in order to continue this weekly program and to make it bigger and better, we are kindly asking for suggestions and volunteers. If you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials, and you can contact Dr. Koumarane for details. So I'll introduce our moderator today, who is Shalama Mohammed, the co-director of this ICC Zoom platform, who is a business teacher and researcher from Trinidad and Tobago. She obtained her master's degree in business psychology from Franklin University in the USA. Shalama, welcome.
Thanks so much, Shakir. Assalamu alaikum, namaste, and a warm welcome to all of you. Thanks so much for choosing to be here with us. This program is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on the YouTube channel of the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center. So welcome to all of you on YouTube at this time. To avoid intrusions from trolls, our IT manager has muted everyone. Speakers, please do not admit anyone, do not unmute anyone, and do not allow anyone to share your screen. Thanks so much for cooperating. Our program today is entitled Mahatma Gandhi's Contribution to Human Rights. December 10th, today is December 8th, December 10th marks International Human Rights Day, commemorating the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights by the United Nations General Assembly in 1948. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights aims to promote and protect the fundamental rights and freedoms of all individuals worldwide. That's according to the UN website. Interestingly, just 10 months earlier in 1948, on January 30th, Mahatma Gandhi was assassinated in New Delhi. Could it be that International Human Rights Day was as much a tribute to Gandhi's work as it was a response to the atrocities of World War II? On September 24th, 2019, United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres reflected on Gandhiji's legacy, stating, Gandhiji's vision and philosophy are pillars of the work of the United Nations. Part of his genius lay in his ability to see the interconnectedness and unity between all things. Gandhiji's political achievements, including leading the movement that ended colonial rule in India using peace, love, and integrity to prevail. But his vision went far beyond politics to encompass human rights and sustainable development. Today, we will explore who was Mahatma Gandhi and what was Mahatma Gandhi's contribution to human rights. And it is with great pleasure that I introduce to you our first presenter, and this is Professor Vahed of South Africa, a history professor at the University of KwaZulu-Natal with research interests in colonial encounters, transformations of Indian identities, and the role of Islam and Muslims in South Africa. He also wrote a very interesting book with Ashwin Desai that I'm sure he will tell you about. Welcome, Professor Vahed. You have 20 minutes for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And thank you for inviting me. I mean, the subject of Gandhi and human rights is very, I think it's more complex than we would assume. And so I try to relate it in terms of his approach to indentured labor. Go to the next slide. We can go to the, yeah, okay. So in 1940, H.G. Wells, who wrote the book, The Rights of Man, is quite a famous author. He sent a list of human rights to Gandhi, and there were 5 of them. The right to life and liberty, the freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression, the right to work and education, and the right to recognition as a person before the law. So it's quite interesting because what Wells wanted was for Gandhi, to add to this list. But what instead what he said was, I have received your cable. I have carefully read your 5 articles. You will permit me to say that you are on the wrong track. I feel sure that I can draw up a better charter of rights than you have drawn. But what good will it be? Who will become its guardian? Now, I think when that question of who will become its guardian, when you look at around us today, I think that's a very pertinent point, right? That's something that Gandhi saw, because if you look at whether it's the different conflicts that are taking place or the rulings of the ICC, etc., because certain countries have the veto, it's, you can easily veto your sort of allies, and you don't, so there isn't really anybody who is able to enforce these human rights or rights. So Gandhi then advises him, begin with a charter of duties of man, and I promise you that the rights will follow as spring follows winter. And he says, I write from experience. As a young man, I began my life by seeking to assert my rights and soon discovered that I had none, not even over my wife. So I began by discovering and performing my duty. And then he goes on to say that today, because I perform my duty, I have more rights than, I don't know of anyone who possesses more rights than I do. Okay, we can go to the next slide, please. The next slide, please. Okay, so we mentioned that the UN, Charter of Human Rights that was adopted in December 1948. And interestingly, so in January, Julian Huxley, who was then was an evolutionary biologist and director general of the newly created UNESCO, he wrote to Gandhi and said that, this is what he wrote to him. He said, the world of man is at a critical stage in its political, social, and economic condition. If it is to proceed further on the path towards unity, it must develop a common set of ideas and principles. One of these is a common formulation of the rights of man. So Gandhi replied to him that I learned from my illiterate but wise mother that all rights to be deserved and preserved come from duty well done. Thus, the very right to live accrues to us only when we do the duty of citizenship of the world. Now, if anybody who has read Hind Swaraj will not will understand this position, because in it, Gandhi says that he regretted that everybody was demanding rights, but nobody was thinking of duties. He wrote in Hind Swaraj, if instead of insisting on the right, everyone does his duty, there will immediately be the rule of order established among mankind. Then he says, rights do not come directly from duty well performed, are not worth having. Real rights are a result of performance of duty, and where everybody wants rights, who shall give them to whom? Now here I think the figure of the Italian, Giuseppe Mazzini becomes very, very, it's a very important influence that he has on Gandhi's thinking, and he does mention him in Hind Swaraj as well, because Mazzini wrote at a time in the, if you look at historically, most religions also, they don't speak of rights, but they speak of duties, right? So John Locke, I think in the mid-17th century, then speaks of property rights. But by the 19th century, even the French Revolution, they intertwines rights and duty. But there was an important change in the mid-19th century where you had the revolutions in Europe, and you had the works of Marx and Engels, and people suddenly began speaking about rights. So it is in this context that Mazzini then writes this book on the duties of man. I think it's 1860, but in which he talks about your individual duties to society, duties to humanity, the importance of education in teaching duties, moral principles, the importance of international cooperation, as well as women's rights. So this clearly does have an important bearing on Gandhi's thinking, and in Indian Opinion in 1905, he even includes a biography of Mazzini. And he read the work of Mazzini before he wrote Hind Swaraj, and it was quite influential. It was quite influential in his own thinking. So the point that Mazzini makes is that every man must learn to rule himself first, and that is something also that Gandhi talks about, right? And so, so the point then is that when Gandhi comes to South Africa, he comes there and he makes his demands as a citizen, because he's thrown off a train, and he then demands. He says, all citizens possess certain rights and privileges, but he soon realizes when he's thrown off the train in Pietermaritzburg that as an Indian in this racial colony, he had no rights as a citizen, but he had a duty, and that duty was to resist the injustice. And so he spends the rest of his life in a political struggle to secure the legal rights of Indians, because he saw that as his duty, but he did not associate the demand for citizenship as automatically coming with rights. So you as an individual have to fulfill certain of your duties in order to merit the rights. And one of the things that I think becomes to understand this is that, when he participates, for example, in the South African War for the British and against the Zulu rebellion, he writes there clearly that if I am going to demand certain rights, then I have to fulfill certain duties. And so, he says the authorities may not always be right, but so long as the subjects owe allegiance to a state, it is then their duty to support, to assist. So the idea of human rights, we know, has expanded so massively in the past few decades. Before that, you had civil rights, political rights, but since 1948, both have merged into this concept of human rights. But it has also expanded much more in the last few decades, because you have the demand for, initially it was about political rights, freedom of speech, freedom of dissent, etc. But now you have women's rights, gay rights, housing rights, economic rights, healthcare, etc. So The other point that we should also keep in mind in looking at this concept of human rights and how it fits in with what Gandhi is saying about duty is that if you look at the elites today, right, many of them have opted out of what he considers as having a duty. So if you look at the elites in the societies, they are committed, they want their rights as citizens, but that duty is gone because they will now send their children to private school to live in gated communities. They support privatization. They reject the public sector, accept the free market, and so on. So in a way, then, that even though Gandhi himself rejected that growth model, but you find that when he was emphasizing duty, that is what he's referring to. But today, the duty is forgotten in terms of rights. Okay, we can go to the next slide. The next slide, please. Okay, so in relating to, although the human rights was only adopted in 1948, we find that there was the Declaration of the International Labour Organization was founded in 1919, and as part of the Treaty of Versailles, and it also emphasized certain rights that people had: the right to collective bargaining, the elimination of forced labor, the abolition of child labor, etc. And I want to suggest that when you look at Gandhi's attitude to indentured labor, you find that many of these ideas were already implicit in his own thinking about indentured labor. You can go to the next slide. You can tell me when I have 3 minutes, then I'll just round up. The next slide, please. Right. So the point I'm making is that while he did not accept that the classical liberalism that all people are born with rights simply because they are human, and that all rights are inalienable, in the way he lived and his actions and his notion of justice was very similar to the UN Declaration of Human Rights. And it involved, as I explained consistently, and there's a Bindu Puri has written extensively on that involves unilateral duties towards others as well. So he wrote in Hind Swaraj, the prince's duty is to act as a true servant of the people. They will rule not by the right granted by someone outside, never by the right of the sword. They will rule by the right of service, of greater wisdom. They will then have the right to collect taxes voluntarily paid and expect certain services equally voluntarily rendered, not for themselves, for the sake of the people. If they fail to perform this simple duty, then the peasants not only owe no return duty, but the duty devolves on them of non-violent resistance, right? So you can understand his thinking here, that there are rights and duties, and if one party is not fulfilling a right, then the other has a duty to resist. Okay, we go to the next one. Next slide, please. Right, so during his early years, so I'll just sum up very briefly that Gandhi himself said, and in his green pamphlet also, he does have some examples of, which was written in 1896. He does have a few examples of the abuse that was suffered by indentured workers, but overall, his point was that he was not sufficiently familiar with the work or with the conditions of indentured labor to make a very considered judgment on their condition. But what is important is that the right, Ashutosh Kumar has done a lot of work in this area, and where he argues, makes the argument that, as you see in the next decade, that Indian nationalists were less concerned about the welfare of the indentured workers per se, but they were keen to use indentured labor to bargain for better rights for free Indians as imperial citizens. Okay, the next slide, please. Right, so on the condition, so you can see that he's beginning to write about the impact of indentured labor on the system of indenture on the migrants themselves. And he says that because the society and the religious, cultural instruction and so on is absent, that the people suffer through alienation and they begin to, he used the word, deteriorate morally and ethically. So he's saying that from the moment they leave India, they have no guidance and it becomes easy to yield. Without the societal structures there, it becomes very easy to yield to temptation to tell a lie, for example, right? And he also does make a point that the protector does not provide any protection to the workers. Okay, next slide, please. Right. So now this is very interesting if you look at it. Because of time, we don't need to read all of this, but I'll just summarize what I'm saying. So there were several grounds on which Gandhi and Indian nationalists wanted to end labor. So the first point was that, as we know, that a color line had been drawn across the empire, while Indians wanted their rights as British citizens. The white colonies refused them that right. And so one of the arguments of Indian nationalists was that Gandhi himself, he told an Natal advertised a newspaper that whites can't be critical. They cannot demand one class of labor of Indians and not have another class. So you can't say we only want indentured workers, but not free migrants, right? We can go to the next slide. And so his point was that one of the arguments they wanted to make was that because Indians were being denied, because Indians were being denied their rights as British citizens, then therefore we should stop indentured labor as a way to punish the colonies. And this was a message that was also embraced at the Indian National Congress. And in 1905, it resolved that the British government of India should prohibit the emigration of indentured labor and adopt other retaliatory measures on the recognition of the status of Indian immigrants as British citizens in all colonies, right? So I got a photo there of Joseph Chamberlain because, Indians had, one of the reasons that the British went to war in the Transvaal was that they wanted to protect the rights of Indians. But after the war, they introduced very racist legislation. This was a British government. And so that is why now the Indian National Congress got involved. And for some reason, the issue of Indians in South Africa became a pivotal issue at all conference meetings, more so than Indians in any other part of the diaspora. Okay, the next slide, please. Right. So there are essentially three arguments that we're looking at. So the first one I already told you, which is that stop indentured labor as a way to punish the white colonies. But the second argument was that the reason that there were so many anti-Indian laws was that the arrival of indentured labor was pushing the population very high. And so whites felt threatened. So if indentured labor was stopped and there was no more migration and Indians were not coming into Natal, then obviously the population would stabilize. There would be no increase annually, and therefore those Indians who are already in the colony should be able to enjoy better rights, right? So, but one of the things that Gandhi did oppose, because in 1903, the government wanted to make sure that after 10 years, all Indians return to India. And so here Gandhi spoke for their rights, where he says, they come from India in order to avoid starvation, they break all ties, become domiciled in Natal, form new associations, and to now expect them to break that home is nothing short of cruelty. Okay, so we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, but now, so from 1906, we know Gandhi was beginning to think change his own thinking about many issues, satyagraha, about the nature of the soul, about ways to live, and he was also experimenting in his ashrams. So we find that, so I don't need to go through this because everybody who has read about indentured labor knows that it was a very oppressive system. And so Gandhi then begins to, even his newspaper begins to talk. There are reported some of the cases of abuse of workers. And then this leads Gandhi to a very important conclusion. You can go to the next slide. And so this the top is the previous all the passive resistors, but here's the Phoenix settlement on the top and Tolstoy at the bottom, where he was experimenting with these new ways of living. And so in June 1907, there was an incident where an employer hit his employee, and Gandhi wrote an editorial in Indian Opinion where he says that while there is there's no point in taking revenge on this particular individual, because if you want to cure a disease, its cause must first be ascertained. And if we look at the cause of the state of affairs, we shall find that indentured labor itself is an evil thing. If the system of indentured labor is put an end to, the kind of oppression described above will also stop. For in ordinary service, one is not bound up as the indentured labor is. But if the service does not suit him, he is free to give up. So here he is speaking against the system of indenture itself, servitude of a contract system. He says under this agreement, under harsh terms, individuals have to surrender their freedom to the employer for a fixed period, placing the workers at a disadvantage. And so he saw compulsion in the system, and this compulsion he felt was prone to abuse, and this led him to conclude that the whole system was an evil thing. As I told you, so one of the incidents also reported by Noria from the Gujarati section of Indian Opinion, 9 January 1909, where he writes that he gave up things like cocoa, tea, and coffee because these are produced through the labor of men who work more or less in conditions of slavery. He wrote that cocoa was produced in the Congo, where the indentured Africans were made to work beyond all limits of endurance. Okay, the next slide, please. Right. Is that okay? So, okay, so I don't need to go through this whole thing, but that's in that photograph at the back, you see J. Natesan on the right standing, was a great supporter of Gandhi in South India. But basically, two delegations went to London when South Africa was becoming a union, right? And so one of the as part of their arguments, besides the fact of the political situation of Indians, they also mentioned indentured labor and that it should end. And they spoke about the moral and ethical collapse, the tax that was imposed on free Indians, the denial of trading rights after the indenture. And they said that the indenture had given the colony the best energies of his life, and yet he was denied an opportunity to settle down and finish his years as a respectable freeman. Therefore, in the interest of the colony, of the free Indian, of the indentured laborers themselves, the whole system of indenture must end, right? So I'm trying to relate this also to the ILO, which was only adopted in 1940, but you can see some of its principles are already being spoken about. So Gandhi wrote to Natesan in 1911, indentured men lose terribly in moral fiber. As a solution to the poverty of India, such emigration has in no way proved helpful. As a nation, we lose prestige by sending our poorest brethren as slaves. No nation of free men will tolerate such a system for a moment. Okay, next slide, please. Right. So this movement to end indenture is a very interesting, because the Indian National Congress, led by, that's a photo of Gokhale there, most of you would know his photo. They passed the resolution 29 December 1909, stating that the indenture to Natal must end. A resolution was passed in February in the Indian Legislative Council, and it was passed unanimously. Now, Gandhi welcomed his decision in an editorial in Indian Opinion on 5th of March 1910. He says this artificial emigration will go a long way towards solving many of the difficulties of South Africa. However, so despite being happy that this system was ending, he was not pleased that Gokhale had linked, that this resolution linked the end of indenture as a punishment for the non-redress of grievances of free Indians in South Africa. He said what they should have done was that they should have taken the higher standpoint and moved for the stoppage of indenture altogether as being inherently bad and no benefit to the indentured men themselves. No redress may be granted to the free Indians, can be allowed to continue a state of things that is immoral. Professor Gokhale has taken the lesser step because he knows that he may not carry the government with him in condemning the system of indenture as such. It is for us here to make clear that we ask for the stoppage of indentured labor for its own sake and because we consider it is detrimental to the moral well-being of those who are indentured. So this is important because the Legislative Council then adopted the resolution and indenture ended in 1911. But indenture was continuing elsewhere. So Gandhi understood that Gokhale would not have got the whole system ended, but he felt that he wanted to make it clear that there's no point in achieving something because you're getting something else in return. But what people must be made to see was that the system of indenture was evil in itself. So I think that is the last slide, right? So I'll just sum up what I'm saying. So the fact that Gandhi rarely spoke about human rights, right? And partly it's because he always went against the conventional thinking of his time. So though he did not write very specifically about human rights, he let his actions in this regard do the talking. It was necessary for him to advert to duties because he realized that the language of duties was becoming obsolete. People, even people who are oppressed, they want to demand the rights, but nobody wants to listen to duties because they feel that they have been doing duties all their lives. So, and the other point we see from this is that while Gandhi had difficulties with outcomes that he might agree with, so he agreed with the end of indenture, but he felt it had not been achieved for the correct reason. The reasoning was not correct. And as a consequence of this incorrect reasoning, or merely because the other party gave in, they capitulated, but it was not from a underlying belief. It was more expediency than a belief that this system is wrong. So for him, he believes that the oppressed parties might win a recognition of their rights from the oppressor. But unless the oppressor has a fundamental change of heart, and if he has capitulated for the wrong reason, because it's just expedient to do so, then you have not really achieved entirely what you set out to do. So in other words, this is a good example where in terms of the rights, he wanted the people, he wanted the recognition that this indentured system was evil in itself. So I tried to link that with the International Labour Organization and the rights of workers to show that what he was critiquing was something that the ILO would do in 1919. So even though he did not write very specifically about rights, it's implicit in his writings. Thank you.
Excellent, Professor Vahed. An excellent expose on the work of Gandhiji in not just the work, but his thoughts on the whole indentureship system. And I don't know that we've had so much information about this brought to the fore. So I want to thank you very much for doing so. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look in the chat, you will see a number of comments from members of the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you to ask your questions directly to Professor Vahed. Now, I've allowed that the time go over simply because the information is really fantastic, and we needed to have this brought to the fore. So please, if you would like to ask a question directly to Professor Vahed, kindly indicate by raising your electronic hand, which you will find in the reactions button at the base of your Zoom screen. Meanwhile, I'm seeing Dr. Zabani Roy. She's posed a question: how Gandhiji's movement for human rights influenced him to fight for Indian freedom from the British Raj. She's
Yes, so
unable.
I think I answered that indirectly, because when I spoke about the fact that, he was thrown off the train in Natal, and he realized then that he did not have any rights as a citizen. And he saw it that if there is an injustice, it becomes your duty to resist. So in that way, when he saw that irrespective of the consequences, when he saw in any situation, so if he saw that the policies of the British Raj, then it becomes, as a human being, it becomes your duty. So rather than just saying, I demand the right to a vote, or I demand the right to independence, it becomes your duty to resist. And he is very specifically where he says in a non-violent way. So that you can say that underlines all his movements. And he also, sort of the second point is that, in the end, he wanted the British to see that it was an unjust system also that was in place.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
And I think all his actions were dictated by that principle, the rights and duties.
Thank you. We have another question from GIO Europe. How was Nelson Mandela influenced by Mahatma Gandhi?
Yes, I think here, we have, it's sort of well chronicled, because whether it's Chief Albert Luthuli, he visited India. I don't know how many of you have heard of Albert Luthuli, but he was the leader of the African National Congress. When Mandela emerged, then our president of the African National Congress was actually Chief Albert Luthuli, and he won a peace prize a Nobel Peace Prize for 1960, right? But he also happened to visit India in 1938 as part of his Christian, he belonged to some Christian mission, so he came for a conference. But he was very influenced by the resistance struggle in India, and so therefore he wore, the white cap of the time, the white hat. So it's hard to, if you look at, like Mandela, and even though they talk about being influenced by Gandhi, they did take a different path, which is that eventually they felt that non-violent resistance had failed. And so they formed an organization called Umkhonto we Sizwe, and that embarked on a military struggle. But if you look at Luthuli now, the reason why you had the ANC, and when they had this debate, he refused to, he didn't agree with the formation of the Umkhonto we Sizwe. So that is why they formed a separate organization, so that the ANC, throughout its existence, remained a embraced the philosophy of non-violence, whereas MK now became a separate organization. So I would say that, they were inspired by him, but I would say, like, if you look at South Africa, the person who was the greatest, most inspired was probably our Chief Luthuli, I would say.
Wonderful. I want to thank you very much. I'm not seeing any questions at this time. So, Professor Vahed, this has been quite an insightful presentation, and I want to thank you very, very much for your time, your expertise, and your knowledge. We really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. I did say I had to excuse myself because I have another engagement. So, sorry.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that was our presentation from Professor Ghulam Vahed. And we now move to our second speaker, who is Professor Deva Koumarane of France. Originally from India, he migrated to Reunion and then to France. He speaks Tamil, writes poetry, and studied Tamil culture, French language and literature, history, and political science. Welcome, Professor Koumarane. Are you able to unmute? I'm seeing you on video. Can you unmute, please? Yes, you're unmuted.
Hello? Okay.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening.
My speech on Mahatma Gandhi, human rights. For me, Mahatma Gandhi, after his arrival in South Africa, he was victim of all the bad ideas in India. He believed before his departure to South Africa, he believed in caste system in India. He cannot understand other religions in India. When he came in South Africa, the problem we know very well. The world knows this problem. When he came to India, he was Mohandas Gandhi. After this problem, great problem on platform of the railway station in South Africa, he became Mahatma Gandhi. Because at this time, he understood the human rights. Before, also, he's an advocate, he's a lawyer. And he was very influenced also, don't forget it, by the great writer of Russia, great writer, Tolstoy. He was influenced by him. And he has a particularity relation with France, particularly with his friend Romain Rolland. He is one of the great writer, Nobel Prize writer, French writer. He was his friend. And when he came to France in 1931, he met the writer Romain Rolland. For me, Mahatma Gandhi, before his fighting for the independence of India, why? But India was not so influenced by the Western civilization. India not influenced by Western civilization. The main problem for Mahatma Gandhi is the unity between Muslims and Hindus, also Christians, and also the union between all the castes in India. And some French from Western people did not today also don't understand the position of Mahatma Gandhi in front of the caste system. He believed in caste system, Gandhi. He believed. But he believed only in 4 castes in India. But he said very well, I am Hindu. I believe in my religion. In my religion, there is the caste system. Not caste system for Mahatma Gandhi, not superiority or inferiority. It is equality between caste. 4 castes only. He ejected other castes. But if we take today India, you have no 4 castes. We have a lot of castes in India. And the great problem for Mahatma Gandhi is the untouchability. Before the independence of India, for him, he was a fighter against injustice and in the bad caste system. And also, when he came to Paris on 1931, it was a great meeting in Paris, December 1931. In Paris, and a lot of people participated to this meeting. And he was very frank vis-a-vis the position. Before the independence of India, he would like to reform Indian society. Before, very important for him. Before the independence of India, he was a great fighter against injustice, against the caste system and fanatism of the religions. And also for Mahatma Gandhi, for this simple reason, he loved France. Why? Because he said France is the country, the birthplace of human rights. Today also only France is a birthplace of human rights. For this reason, when he came to France, also after he went to Pondicherry was the capital of French India. He criticized the injustice and the caste system. Why we are living under the flag of France, liberty, equality, fraternity, and you are living under this injustice. But also, today, in India, between religions, don't say India is a good country, is a great country for me. But sometimes some injustice between religions, Mr. Poverty, superiority, inferiority. Gandhi, I think for me, Gandhi was a great philosopher, not a politician, not a political leader. He was a great philosopher. He would like, firstly, the harmony, the independence of India, not politically. Politically, India was a colony of British Empire. But on civilization and culture, India was independent. Gandhi told, is very important to understand this main idea of Mahatma Gandhi. For this reason, for him, before the independence, he would like to reform Indian society. And the great problem of India in this day, it is the harmony between two religions, two important religions also today, Hinduism and Islam. I think it was very difficult for him to work for the unity and for union between these religions. For this reason, you know very well that you are a partition of India, Pakistan on side, a Muslim country, and Hindu. India is not Hindu. India is the country of all the religions. It is very important. And also, Gandhi was, don't forget this main idea. He was for the equality between women and men. That's very, very important. He appreciated the sacrifice of the woman, and he respected very well with him his wife, Miss Kasturibai. She was his advisor, and after his, I think after Kasturibai Gandhi, Madam Kasturibai Gandhi, that before him, in I think 1944. And this time, I think Gandhi became very, very depressive. Now, before his independence, Gandhi was not in Gandhi. He was before 1944. It was very difficult for him to have an idea. For this time, he was very, very at this time he was not present for independence. For him, independence the day politically, he was not very interested. For him, independence India, when all the people of India, rich, poor, Muslim, Christian, Hindu, Buddhist, Sikhs, they have a good life in India. That's for this reason, I think he was one of a great leader, great advocate for the human rights. That day, before independence, India. Also today, Gandhi is one of the thinker of human rights. When I say human rights, it is very important to think human rights between man and woman, between all the religions. But I think India today is a birthplace of very important religions. Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, and India accepted other religion coming other side with the other civilization like Islam, Christianism, and also today we have by faith I took in religion born in Iran. And my conclusion, excuse me, but I am not very difficult to speak in English. Today, Gandhi is, for me, I don't say was, is also a very great thinker and philosopher also. When you say, Gandhi is a political leader, Mahatma Gandhi, no, he is a great philosopher. Philosopher today, great thinker. And also, very important today, to study again and again the deep things, ideas of Mahatma Gandhi, also today on human rights, on the relation between women and men, between rich and poor, also everything. Gandhi is a former, not only political leader, he is a philosopher, great philosopher. Okay, I don't say. If you have some question, I am waiting for you to answer with my English.
Thank you very much, Professor Koumarane. I think you did well, given your language restrictions. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we will welcome your questions now. Please raise your electronic hand if you would like to pose a question directly to Professor Koumarane. So an interesting take on this particular topic. Professor Koumarane, you're saying that Gandhiji would have influenced in some way religious rights as well as women's rights in India. I'm not seeing any raised hands. And so I'm assuming we have no questions at this point in time, but Dr. Vandana Singh is saying Gandhiji was in favor of the Varna system, but against untouchability. He worked hard to eliminate this system from society. Would you like to comment on that?
You know, the position of Mahatma Gandhi in front of caste system, I don't like to choke you. I am agree with him. For Gandhi, he's Hindu. I was born Hindu. I am obliged to believe in this caste system. For when we said caste system, only 4 castes in India, not other castes. But I think today in India you have a lot of castes, more than 50 or 60 castes. For Gandhi, you have 4 castes only, not inferiority and superiority between these castes. And he was a great fighter against untouchability. And he was very, very great. And I think India, you have no Gandhi, like Gandhi today, a man to beginning to fight against this untouchability. With your permission, if you allowed me, in Tamil Nadu, he was a great leader, state Annadurai, called also South Indian Gandhi. Tamil Nadu, he was against the caste system, particularly untouchability. Today, I think we are Indian, in diaspora Indian, we have to fight against this system. The future of India is all the person living in equality in India. I think it is not necessarily not today. Gandhi is a great leader, not only for India, or for the world. We have to a duty to study Gandhi, also to talk about Gandhi in the world. It's very, very important. Because Gandhi today, for me, is a great man, great philosopher, great thinker. And other philosophers also I know, but Gandhi, why? Because he was very sincere in these ideas. All the ideas, Gandhi was very sincere. I say today, Mahatma Gandhi, I think also in India and otherwise, Mahatma Gandhi is a other divinity, Hindu divinity. For status Gandhi in the house. In the morning, I pray, Gandhi, help me. Like you have in front of Shiva or Parvati or Ganesh. Gandhi is not Ganesh, ni Parvati, ni Shiva. Gandhi is a great man, leader, an advocate. He was advocate. He is very sincere advocate. He was very bad advocate in the court, human court, but he was very, also today he is very good leader in the world, in the court of the world. That's my opinion. That I don't see as Mr. Shalima.
Thank you so much,
Shalima.
Professor. Thank you.
That's my idea. My idea. Not,
Right.
I don't force everybody to have to accept my idea. I think Gandhi is a very, very great leader. I write a lot of articles in French, and very soon we are also organizing in Paris the international conference on Mahatma Gandhi. It is very important today also. Today, very, very important. Gandhi is not a Hindu divinity. Also, people talk. In every house we have sometime statues of Gandhi. Before statues of Ganesh or Shiva. No, Gandhi is not. I think he's not religious man. Gandhi. He's not religious man. He believed in religion. He respect all the religions, but he was not very religious man. Actually, he was very, very free with the religions. For him, all the otherwise, don't. Please excuse me. I would like to say, we forget also Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda was a master of Mahatma Gandhi. The first return to India, the man he would like to see, he was Swami Vivekananda. But at that time, Swami Vivekananda is not in Calcutta, he was in Himalaya. But for Gandhi, the master of Gandhi, the thinker of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, is Swami Vivekananda. It is very, very important also to think Swami Vivekananda. Vivekananda, not only a Swami and religious person, he was a great philosopher, Swami Vivekananda. He was against all the injustice. He was for the reform of the India.
Okay. All right. I want to thank you very much. I'm not seeing any raised hands at this point in time. There are a few comments in the chat. And so at this time, I'd like to say thank you very much, Professor Koumarane. I know you had some technical difficulties at the beginning, but we seem to have worked through that. So I really appreciate your efforts today and your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good. So ladies and gentlemen, we want to move on now to our third item. And this is a presentation, narration of a photo exhibition, which was recorded at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Cultural Cooperation in Trinidad in August. It was done in collaboration with the Gandhi Seva Sangh of Trinidad and Tobago, headed by Sharda Ram Lakhan. The photo exhibition was narrated by Dr. Mohammed Keshavjee, and you will hear my voice from time to time posing a few questions, although I think it was not necessary. Our next speaker, Dr. Keshavjee, was quite ready to handle the entire thing on his own. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's bring that recording to you now. Author, lawyer, and most importantly, alternative dispute resolution mediator who is known worldwide. Mr. Mohammed Keshavjee is here with us in Trinidad and Tobago, currently at the Mahatma Gandhi Institute for Cultural Cooperation as the lecturer today, a guest lecturer under the auspices of the Gandhi Seva Sangh. And we at the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center are very, very happy to have him as our guest in Trinidad and Tobago. So we're here to experience this lovely Gandhi exhibition in pictures. And one of the reasons why we are going to have this conversation with Mr. Mohammed Keshavjee is because of this lovely book that he's written, Into That Heaven of Freedom, the Impact of Apartheid on an Indian Family's Diasporic History. This is actually the story of his family's history. Now, interestingly, Mr. Mohammed Keshavjee is well placed to speak to all of Mr. Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, because he is the peace awardee, peacetime awardee of the Gandhi King Ikeda Peace Award, a very, very prestigious award which was awarded to him, being the first Indian of South African origin to have received that from the United States. So, Mr. Keshavjee, we welcome you, and I would encourage you, please, let us know all that you can possibly tell us about the Mahatma.
Well, thank you very much for your very gracious introduction. I see a beautiful array of photographs here, and it's interesting how photography can also be a major source of information. And here we can see a certain context in which Mahatma Gandhi lived. Remember, at the time of these pictures, he was not the Mahatma. So basically what we are seeing here is Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's first legal office. And in this particular photograph, which was taken place in Johannesburg, we have a woman sitting there called Sonia Schlesinger. Ms. Schlesinger was Mahatma Gandhi's secretary, and the other person is a person called Pollack. Now, interestingly enough, when Henry Sylvester James came to South Africa, but when C.F. Andrews came to South Africa, when he came to the dock, he didn't know who Gandhi was. And he asked Pollack, "Where's the man?" And he saw Gandhi with his Indian khadi clothing. So he went there and he tried to touch his feet. And Gandhi stopped him and said, no, no, you don't do that. That is the respect C.F. Andrews held Mahatma Gandhi in, because he heard of Gandhi meeting the governor of India. When somebody described what Gandhi's work was, he thought he's going to meet a man who looks very flamboyant, with big suit, and and here was Gandhi with just like a dhoti. And that's the respect in which he held this man, to the extent that C.F. Andrews left his work and came to work on the ending of the indentures. So what you have here is the very early period of Gandhi's life. Of course, these are the photos of his South African period that you'll always see, particularly this photograph, particularly that photograph, and I'm not sure which that photograph is, but that gives you the dynamics. Or that's a school in Rajkot.
Yeah.
Now, Rajkot is my ancestral home.
Is that right?
Keshavjee, my great-grandfather, was born in Rajkot. So if you go to India, to Rajkot today, the well 40 miles from Rajkot is Chotila. Chotila is a little city, a little town. And the well in the city was built by my great-grandfather in the 1850s.
And your great-grandfather's name was?
Keshavjee. Keshavjee Ramji was his name. He had partly a Hindu name because they were living in a Hindu area, but he was a Muslim.
Right. So according to this photo, this is where Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi studied, the Kishore Singhji Primary School at Rajkot.
At Rajkot, which is about 40 miles away from my family's ancestral home in India. It's in Gujarat. So
before you move on, his family, according to this photo, he was born in Gujarat.
Gandhi was born in Gujarat in a place called Porbandar. Then Gandhi went to school in a place called Gondal, which is very close to Rajkot. My mother comes from Gondal. My mother's family comes from Gondal. My father's family comes from Rajkot. Gandhi was born in Porbandar. And Porbandar is in Gujarat, which is the center from which the Memon Muslim community come. The Memon Muslim community are a very prominent business Gujarati family in South Africa, Pakistan, and in various countries of the world. Yes, I'm going to talk to you about 3 photographs which I thought are very interesting, and my book touches on it. This is the ambulance corps, the first photograph, which in Gandhi was an ambulance corps group. And one of the persons in this photograph, which I could never particularly pinpoint, is a man called R.K. Khan. R.K. Khan was a lawyer from England. He was an Ismaili Muslim from India who Gandhi asked to come to South Africa. And R.K. Khan became the secretary at one time of the oldest political party in Africa called the Natal Indian Congress, which Mahatma Gandhi had set up. So this photo was Gandhi's voluntary contribution during the Boer War. And this is a fascinating picture. The second picture that captures me is this picture here. This is the picture to which my uncle became a student of Mahatma Gandhi's.
And your uncle's name was?
My uncle's name was Rajabali Velshi Keshavjee. And Gandhi picked him up on his back. He was the youngest school child. And when they used to walk to Johannesburg, because Gandhi told them don't use the railways, then he would tell him, Bapu, I'm very tired. And Gandhi would bend down and put him in his back and carry him. But my uncle is not in this picture, but the people who are in this picture are the people called the Mrs. Pillay is a woman in this book. And this is the family of Mrs. Pillay. For 5 generations, they were part of the freedom struggle of South Africa. Their grandson today is the head of the Tamil community, Dr. Murthy Subbu. And they have done a history of the Tamil community's contribution. So it was the Tamil community with Gandhi in the middle, Herman Kallenbach. Herman Kallenbach was a Jewish architect. And the last picture is Gokhale, who came in 1912 and asked Gandhi to come back to India. Over here, I will only comment on one particular photo which I think I can throw some light on, which is the Dundee March, the Salt March of 1929-1930. Interestingly, Gandhi was a barrister at law from the Inner Temple in London. And Gandhi thought that the salt tax was very inequitable because it was part of the colonial system where you had to buy salt that brought the ships back. And Gandhi said, I will go and march. And he marched for about 279 miles, right up to the sea. Now, the interesting twist is here, that when Gandhi did this, he was disbarred by the Inns of Court. Inner Temple Inn disbarred him. And funny enough today, if you go to London to the Inns of Court and you ask, where is the Inner Temple Inn? They'll say it's that place. You'll see a big plaque of Mahatma Gandhi. So posthumously, they have given him his credit. But at that time, they took his license to practice away from him. So that is the greatness of the Dandi March. And I have met people, little kids, who remember him on the Dandi March, who came to South Africa. I find a particular picture here of great interest, and this is in Dagenham, Barking. A few years ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I was invited to give a speech in Barking at this place, and to mark that anniversary, they planted a tree in honor of Gandhi. And interestingly enough, the man who planted the tree and the group we were in is now the head of the party that Kenneth Kaunda led in Zambia. His name is Trevor Mwamba, Father Trevor Mwamba. So the people of Dagenham in England still remember him.
So this is in London now?
This is in London, in East London, yeah.
Yes.
That's Dagenham in East London. We will move to the next few pictures. I wanted to comment here, particularly your second picture here. As a mediator, I was asked to speak a few years ago in England on transformative mediation, which I will speak about tonight. And people came to that program that I was training on and came to me afterwards and said, we loved what you said, and took out photos. He said, that's my mother, that's my grandmother, that's my uncle. So people came with that particular spirit in their heart to that particular training program. And again, these are photos of Gandhi's, but people, this is very interesting because Gandhi made an important impact on the Indians, on the British people, that they themselves felt that his cause was very worthwhile. Moving on, a picture here that grabbed my attention very quickly was Sir Stafford Cripps and Gandhi. Sir Stafford Cripps was a Labour minister at the time, and his daughter was called Peggy. Peggy Cripps married a black African called Joe Appiah. Joe Appiah was a very close friend of Nkrumah's, Kwame Nkrumah. And when he got married, Kwame Nkrumah asked his friend George Padmore to represent him at the wedding of Peggy Cripps, Stafford Cripps's daughter.
Isn't that something?
And that was a few years ago. Now
Here is Mahatma Gandhi with him in 1942.
42. Well, the marriage, I think, must have taken place in 1946, 45, 46, 47, around that time. And their son is a leading academic called Kwame Anthony Appiah, who's written the book Cosmopolitanism. Very leading man on pluralistic discourse. Now to this first picture here, that is what was known as the Aga Khan Palace. And I worked with the grandson of Aga Khan III, who gave this place for Gandhi to stay in during the time he was in incarceration. And Gandhi's wife, Kasturba, died and is buried in this place. And today it is a national museum because the Aga Khan family gifted this place to the Indian government for their historical pictures and exhibitions being held. So it was a beautiful palace at the time. So people today remember Gandhi's incarceration at the Aga Khan Palace. Of course, these are pictures of leading dignitaries that he met at the time, and that now we go deeper into Gandhi's going back to India. So 1915, around December, is the time Gandhi goes back to India, and then from 1915 to 1947, the next, how many years is that? 15, 25?
15 and 10, 25 and 10, 35, 45, about 50.
The next decade or two, Gandhi's activities now is the application of the satyagraha concept in the mass mobilization movement for India's independence. So again, those photographs represent pictorially that dimension. We come to a lot more of that as well. Again, the interesting part was Gandhi knew the Indian railway system inside out. He understood the role of the railways, and he realized that he got to know India through railways because he traveled third class. Gandhi traveled third class and he went through the entire length and breadth of India. So that is where you see that he appealed to the sense of national liberation consciousness as a man who was ready to walk the talk. Because India was polarized between Gokhale and Tilak, between the moderates and the extremists. And Gandhi gave the Indian National Congress a new spirit towards moving for the decolonization of India. So these photographs here, again, to me, represent that very, very exciting period of his life. He's walking through the paddy field during a visit to the affected areas, Noahali, also very popularly known. I didn't mention this, but somewhere you will see Sarojini Naidu. Sarojini Naidu came to a school to which my mother went. And in my book, I think I do mention that she came to Pretoria and she was on the stage in the city where I was born called Marabastad, which is this place, the cover of this book. So Sarojini Naidu also, one more thing in this, in a quick 50 seconds, is you have Jawaharlal Nehru, Mahatma Gandhi, and Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. Interestingly enough, all three were graduates of the British Inns of Court. Jawaharlal Nehru, I think, was Middle Temple, Gandhi was Inner Temple, and I think Vallabhbhai Patel was Lincoln's Inn. So you had the British lawyers who were in the process of the negotiation of the dismantlement of the empire in Asia. So was Muhammad Ali Jinnah. Muhammad Ali Jinnah was at Lincoln's Inn, also a barrister around that time. Then over here we see pictures, again, Lord and Lady Mountbatten, Edwina Ashley and Lord Mountbatten, the last Governor General of India. We see the Rajghat where he died, he was cremated on that block, and the last words he's reputed to have said is, "Hey Ram." And this is again capturing that last few days of his life. So pictorially, I think it gives a very good, small, representative segment of his life from the time he came as a lawyer to South Africa to the destiny that unfolded in his death and beyond.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mohammed Keshavjee. This is Dr. Mohammed Keshavjee. This has been an extraordinary explanation of all of these photos, and we're really, really so happy that you are here to share that with us.
Thank you.
Because apart from that, we would just be going through this and looking at the photos and having very little appreciation for what all of this meant.
No, I'm happy about it. I'm very excited by the capturing of photography for the narration.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
So ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all appreciated all that information. It was absolutely fabulous. And I want to introduce you now to the man, Dr. Mohammed Keshavjee. He's a barrister and author of 4 books. He's the first Indian from Africa to receive the prestigious Gandhi King Ikeda Peace Award for his global contributions to peace and human rights education. Welcome, MK. You're muted. You're still muted. Would you mind unmuting, please?
Yes.
Shalimar, thank you so very much for that gracious introduction. I think my presentation is going to be very short because between the two professors, they've laid the foundation, and I don't want to repeat. I just would like to zoom in into a few key points about a duty-based regime or theory of human rights. And here, human rights is a very complex issue, very complex notion, very contested notion. And I think that billions of words have been written on this since 10th December 1948, but even for decades before that. Perspectives informed by divides like the North-South divide between the so-called industrialized West and the poor South, ideological divides between the East and the West, and also important theological perspectives based on liberation theology by people like Gustavo Gutierrez, the father of liberation theology in Latin America, Pope Francis himself, who's spoken about all these type of difficulties the world is facing, and also Muslim scholars like Farid Isaac in South Africa. So here I wanted to touch on Gandhi's involvement, not as a man, but Gandhi's involvement in the evolution of this whole thinking as a vision. Because don't forget, Gandhi was informed by the thinking of people like Henry David Thoreau, John Ruskin, Leo Tolstoy, Reichenbach, Dadabhai Navroji, and others. And his vision was inspired by the Bhagavad Gita, the Holy Quran, the Bible. So here I'm talking about this inspiration that impacted people like Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, and others, whose perennial search for social justice and human dignity was inspired by Gandhi's philosophy. Now, Professor Vahed very beautifully outlined Gandhi's connection with Julian Huxley and Gandhi's response to what Huxley wanted to know. He also spoke about H.G. Wells. He also spoke about the Hind Swaraj. But I think basically what we see through all this is Gandhi believed in a duty-based charter. I think today's world in human rights is sort of suffused, if not burdened, by a rights-based discourse rather than a duty-based vision. And here I would like to just pose a question that in today's world, how would a duty-based charter be perceived? Would it seem too idiosyncratic? Would it sound too mystical, too eccentric? Clearly, even before the birth of Christ, Cicero's textbook on practical ethics focused on duties, while Immanuel Kant emphasized people's freedom to choose their own ends. But even in the case of Immanuel Kant, when he lectured on ethics, he expounded on a catalogue of duties. And the modern law of torts itself is based on the principle of duty, particularly the law of negligence. Tom Paine, who fanned the fumes of the American Revolution, spoke of the rights of man. But we know that Gandhi was inspired by Giuseppe Mazzini, who spoke about the duties of man. So basically, I think there is a seed in the Western liberal firmament about the principle of duty. And I think today's world requires us to go back to that rather than the system we've got today, which is problematic. Can we have the next slide, please? What might a Gandhian charter look like? According to UNESCO, Gandhi offered an expanded definition of violence that included oppressive structures that erode and damage human dignity and prevent human beings from achieving their fullest potential. We can ask today, what might Gandhi say of the excessive violence perpetrated on the poorest of the poor? I think that's where Gandhi's philosophy would come in a rethink of a fit-for-purpose human rights regime. What would Gandhi say about the violence perpetrated on the planet through pollution in all its forms? What might Gandhi say today about the mass killing of the millions of people throughout the world
through the egregious violation of human rights. Could we have the next one, please, Shakira? I think what is required is a holistic version, a holistic vision. Douglas Roach, a respected Canadian diplomat, states that Antonio Guterres' call for a global response that addresses the root causes of conflict and integrates peace, sustainable development, and human rights in a holistic way from conception to execution resonates with Gandhi's philosophy. Now, this vision is not far removed. It has inspired nonviolent activism in people such as Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Helder Camara of Latin America, Cesar Chavez, Martin Luther King Jr., Desmond Tutu, Desaku Ikeda, and many others. This is now the peace agenda that we will need going forward. And in 2007, the United Nations General Assembly declared October the 2nd, Mahatma Gandhi's birthday, as the International Day of Non-Violence. Shakira, could we have the next slide, please? So Gandhi's solid historical contribution, Ghulam outlined this beautifully when he spoke about the development of Satyagraha, his sole force in the 1900s, the eradication of the indenture system, 1917, the application of Satyagraha towards the independence of India in 1947, inspiring the African freedom movement, Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, Kenneth Kaunda, Albert Luthuli, Jomo Kenyatta, Nelson Mandela, and a very important factor that the civil rights movement in the United States in the 1960s was inspired by Martin Luther King, who drew his inspiration very much from Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy. So there is that solid historical contribution. And we might now go to the next slide, Shakira, that where would Gandhi's thinking come into the new Charter of Human Rights based on a duty-based system? I think these were the principles Gandhi enunciated as early as the 22nd of October, 1925. And I think they lay at the heart of the entire global discourse today. Wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity. It should be humanity and not humanities. A religion without sacrifice, politics without principle. And I would make the submission that globally today, if you look at human rights infractions, they touch on these major social sins and more that have developed and evolved since Gandhi's death in 1948. My final point in this presentation is the last slide, Shakira, that we can see now how each day on the altar of an exclusively, egregiously based, rights-based claim, each of these principles are blatantly violated, making a mockery of human rights and leading to a depletion globally of the moral ozone layer. I think we need to rethink human rights based on the principle of duty and see how duty and rights could be equitably balanced in the way Gandhi lived his own life. Shalima, that is the end of my presentation, and I will be very willing to take questions based on what I've said. Thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dr. Keshavjee. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome your questions. As always, please raise your electronic hand. You will find that in the reactions button at the base of your screen. And it is our honor to welcome Gandhiji's granddaughter, Ms. Ela Gandhi. Please go ahead and unmute.
Thank you so much for all the presentations. It was a wonderful, all the presentations were excellent. And thank you, Dr. Keshavjee, as well for the beautiful exhibition and the explanation. I just want to raise one issue. Recently, I was at the Chota Mutala lecture. I'm not sure if you might have attended or heard about it, but It was the previous public projector, Tuli Madunsela, who delivered the lecture. And part of her, lecture was one issue. She was talking about human rights and Chota Matala's life. And so what she said was that we all talk about justice for all, but we don't talk about all for justice. And this is where I think Gandhiji's ideas come in, all for justice. I would just like to ask you, how do you feel about that?
Thank you, Ella Ben. My great honor to see you again. I recall with great warmth the day I spent with you at Phoenix. Was one of the most inspiring parts of my South African trip. I agree with you, Ella, that we are beginning now to forget the principle of our own duty to ensuring that justice is done. I think what we need today is that commitment of all towards justice for the most vulnerable in society. What your beloved grandfather spoke about in the principle of Sarvodaya. How do you judge progress? You judge progress from the benefit or the detriment to the most marginal in society. And I'm happy that you brought that point forward, because I think we need a global commitment to the vision and the principles that should underpin a global human rights order. It should not be one-sided as it is today, where everybody wants to protect their right, regardless of what the consequences are. So that is my take on that. And I think we've also saw some of these principles when I came to Durban and spent the time with you at Phoenix Farm, where we also discussed the root causes of conflict in South Africa. And I saw that the commitment that you showed to this cause was no different from what your grandfather had worked for. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question, Ilaji, and thank you so much for your response, Dr. Keshavjee. We have a question now from Jay. Jay Nair, go ahead, please. Jay, would you kindly unmute?
Thank you all for allowing me to give you my take on today's interesting discussion on Gandhiji. I have done quite a bit of work on his life, and we had a pictorial presentation in Hamilton through the McMaster University, Peace Studies program. And I've got the book of all the names that you want to know from those pictures. And R.K. Khan, there is a hospital named after him in South Africa, and he was a benefactor. So my take on this human rights, I've done human rights in Canada for a trade union movement. And I followed my brother's take, service to the people, and service that will encourage others to also do service. And in that spirit, who is going to tell the leaders on the world stage that this is how? We've got the United Nations, we've got the declarations of all kinds. Who is going to bring out the teachings of Gandhiji and other philosophers and other people from days of Plato and Socrates and so on and so on and so on. Today, Paisa is the ruler of the world, in my humble opinion, and I know it is. Everybody looks for the dollar. And today we've got a person who's trying to say, don't de-dollarize the dollar. So you've got people who are in that realm, and there's no peace on earth at this moment. There's going to be an implosion. And in light of that, Muhammadji, how can we, as human rights activists, human rights teachers, human rights fighters, get into a realm of asking the leaders of the world, sit down, let's talk, let's do something. How are we going to do it?
Sure. Thank you, Jay. You know, Jay, if you look at the history of all of our people, from the diaspora, from the plantocracy, from all freedom struggles during the last 50, 60 years, I think there's a great strength in the concept of a robust civil society. I think every one of us can do that little bit to push the dial forward. Sadly, we seem to be in a very conflicted world today, where the almighty pound or the dollar or the euro or the rupee, whatever it is, becomes the dominant factor. But I think that there are many people globally today who are concerned about the planet, who are concerned about human rights, who are concerned about gender equality, who are concerned about the problems that we are facing. And I see hope always. I see hope that there will be a new generation that will come up and contribute towards greater conscientization. We can get easily despaired when we see the power of armaments and the power of money, the power of lobbying, but there's also the power of the human spirit. And I think we need to capture that again. I may sound idealistic, but I think without ideals, we lose hope, and we can't afford to do that.
Yeah, thank you very much. We welcome a question from Dr. Gopalakrishnan. Did I get it right? Please unmute.
Okay. Yeah. My name is Gopalakrishnan. You can read it as Gobalakhshnan. You read it in English. Okay. Thank you. Now, my question is following. There are so many South Africans and the people of the Caribbean who have spoken very, very, very well about the diaspora and now about India, about Gandhi and his human rights movement. But I think it's my personal view that they don't speak about, for example, the Tamils in Durban, who helped so much Gandhiji during his first stay there. I know that in Durban, there are still now several descendants of Indians, of Tamilians, I mean, because there are so many principles that in India, Indian Union, we don't follow. I just put, maybe everybody has read it, that to have the unity of India in the beginning of 20th century, he said, also, he was looking at the differences between all the people from India in the British Empire. So he advised everybody of the South, for example, to learn Hindi, and everybody of the North to learn Tamil, because he knew Tamilian people, and certainly he knew also Tamil was the mother of other Dravidian group languages. But nobody is talking about it. So that is my first question. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
MK, do you have a response?
No. Thank you very much, Mr. Gopalakrishnan. I think you made a very interesting point. I think, what I think is important today is that we need to live pluralism. We need to respect different subcultures within our countries, different linguistic traditions, different approaches to do things. And I think that pluralistic commitment would go a long way towards what Gandhi stood for. I mean, Gandhi practiced this in 1912 at his school in Tolstoy Farm. He had Christians, he had Muslims, he had Jains, he had Parsis, he had Tamils. And I think that whole idea of respecting each other but doing what all our religious traditions teach us would be the way forward. But I think that education is at the heart of this discourse.
Yeah,
And I think we have
yeah.
to continue doing that. We should not give that
Yes.
up.
Yes.
We should not give that up. And music, culture, art, literature, these are important things that we must try and keep side by side with scientific growth. I think we can do that side by side. We should. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for the point.
Thank you very much. And the second question is very short, only very short question. When we speak about Satyagraha and Satyagraha principle followed by Gandhi, it was followed in other nations also. So many people were quoted. Now, in Sri Lanka, after the independence in 1948, we should not forget the first movement were following by Satyagraha, by Indian Satyagraha, by the Tamil people of the north and eastern provinces. Only after 10 or 15 years, noting that the Satyagraha movement was not having the result they were wishing, the movements changed for they took another path, unfortunately. So I think that I don't know in Burma, in Malaysia, but I know only in Sri Lanka, but it is not quoted. We know that everything outside Indian Union, outside South Asia, in Europe, in Africa, it is followed well. We quote it, but we should quote also what was present also in South Asia, I mean Sri Lanka. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think Satyagraha today is a very respected concept. And I think if you look at it, if you take the African freedom movement, Dr. Nkrumah in 1950 wore a Gandhi cap on October the 8th, which he called Reform Day. He says, I'm following the principles of Mahatma Gandhi. So, you know, the principle of Satyagraha is a moral force. It's a soul force. It is not weakness, it is strength. And I think that we need to share that principle as a mass mobilization thought, not violence, not anger, not hate, but instead how you can morally reinforce yourself in any struggle, because that has to be at the heart of the struggle. So I think it's very important that we should not lose that principle. I think there's one more hand that's up. If I've answered you, I may not have answered you completely, but I'm so happy that you brought that point up because it started off in South Africa in 1906, 1907.
Yeah, thank you very much. We'll take a question next from Gangadas. Welcome, sir.
Hello, thank you. I have a lingering curiosity. By the way, this was a great educational presentation. The question I have is, could you describe the Indian leadership thinking in the pre-Gandhi era? I'm curious about what they were thinking about in those days, given that most of the people from the colonies wanted to go to England. And I learned to my amazement that there were so many Indians who went to South Africa and some other nations. This was like a revealing discovery, given that for 34 years I taught at the Black University, and it was pro-African at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania. And now I'm seeing the depths of relationships between Indians and South Africa. So my curiosity is, what was the pre-Gandhian thinking in those days? Are you able to describe that for me, please?
Sure. Let me see if I understand your question correctly, Mr. Gangadas. Are you saying pre-Gandhi philosophy about going overseas for education? And would they go to India, or would they go to a Black university, or would they go to England? Is that what your question is?
Broadly, yes.
Okay. Well, we got to keep one thing in mind, Mr. Gangadas, that in the late 19th century, when you come to the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s, right up till the early 20th century, a large part of the educational system that we all grew up under was closely linked to the colonial authorities. So if you're in a colony that was ruled by Holland, you'd automatically end up in Holland for higher education. For me, talking from Africa, and I'm sure that there are quite a few people on this chat, I will say that we went to England because if you wanted to become a doctor, if you wanted to become an economist, if you wanted to become a lawyer, these institutions were overseas. We had to go overseas. We could not study in our own country because there was a certain limitation. Gandhi himself had to go to England to study. He went to Lincoln's, he went to Inner Temple Inn. But I think that post-independence, institutions then began to develop in all these countries around the time of independence. And we could then have indigenous institutions of higher learning. So I think it was partly historical, partly a function of that time. So people went overseas to study, hopefully with the view of coming back and building their country, so contributing to the countries they came to live in. I myself did that. Came from South Africa, lived in Kenya, studied in England, and came back to Kenya. And I'm happy I did it that way. Now, today, if you were in East Africa, obviously you'd go to a local university. So I think that that has changed over the last 50 years. The only thing I would add is that I hope that institutions of higher learning that we set up in the Caribbean and in Africa and in India and in Indonesia and even in the Middle East should maintain a good standard of education that allows children today to access higher education from there to any part of the world. I think if we can make that happen, I think it will be a great plus for us. I don't know if I've answered you correctly, but if I haven't, please do interrogate me again and I'll try.
Excellent answer, because I lived through that, what you have described, national institutions. You know, I am from Guyana, and it was after independence that we got our university, our own university. Most of the times we have to go to England, and then later to the University of the West Indies. And then Chedi Jagan, he started the local university. They disparagingly called it the Jagan's Night School. And all that has changed now, as you have described. I really appreciate your response to my question. It's just a refresher of something that I had missed. And then it's looming again today in terms of our national institutions and what role they should play in development, both cultural and economic development. So thank you very much. It's a great awakening you have just presented.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Das. And I was recently in Trinidad. I was amazed at the work done at the University of West Indies. I was also amazed to note that I learned so much about Gandhi through the research done by a woman from Trinidad, Radhika Mahes, who did her work on indentures. So I think our universities are good. We should allow them to be even better. We should not sacrifice on standards. And I'm with you on that. I hope that we can continue that spirit, you know. Thank you, Mr. Das.
Thank you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. We have a question that Zafar Malik had raised during Professor Koumarane's presentation. And he asked, please advise me about one book that is a great resource about the Mahatma's ideas on human rights. MK, can you please respond?
Yeah. You know, I'm a specialist on conflict resolution. And if I was going to look for a book on conflict resolution with Gandhi in it, we may not find it, because the concept of conflict resolution as we see it today, alternative dispute resolution, is a modern notion. But what I found very valuable is that I started reading Gandhi's general philosophy about goodness, his philosophy about ensuring that if there's a dispute, you try and be fair to both the parties. His whole notion about conflictual relationships which should not be suffused with hatred, with anger, but instead with forgiveness. And I found that with bits and bobs and everything, I was able to put things together. My feeling is that you will not probably find a book on Gandhi and human rights. You may find a lot of books that speak about what human rights ought to be, what a duty-based concept of human rights should be. But then I would go back to Gandhi's writings, his writings in the Hind Swaraj, Gandhi's writings on what it meant to him to be a lawyer when he was able to resolve somebody's conflict. Gandhi's whole ideas about what you see in his book, My Experiments with Truth. I think that if one read 4 or 5 of his books and drew from it the principles that could inform the human rights discourse today, that would be one area from where we can pull out a lot. But I'm not yet certain of one book I can point to, but I'm sure that if one looked up the historiography and tried to see Gandhi on human rights, then you're going to find quite a few people who've written papers who would then extrapolate from Gandhi's thinking what he would have said on a particular matter of human rights that came up. I think that is the way new knowledge is developing today, rather than finding a causal connection on what Gandhi said precisely on 1, 2, or 3 things, but extrapolate from his philosophy and those that he inspired certain principles that today could inform a more just and equitable global human rights order.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll take our final question now from Dr. Devanand Bhagwan. Welcome. Please unmute.
Hi, namaste to everyone. I have been reading just this past week the autobiography of Mahatma Gandhi, and I'm really quite moved by what I read. I mean, I found it quite emotional, as a matter of fact. I'm from Guyana, and what was really interesting is the similarities of what Gandhi and the Indians went through in South Africa, and similar to what Indians have gone through in the Caribbean. And it was really interesting. I'm particularly moved to have seen and heard Ella Gandhi ji. She's still in South Africa, which is really quite amazing. This is fantastic. And yeah, I can really empathize with what's happening. I want to thank you, Dr. Mohammed Keshavjee. I find it interesting, your name. Your first name appears to be Muslim, and Keshav is Hindu, is it not? Yeah. Now, what is rather interesting is I'd like to know, how does Gandhism or Gandhi's philosophy impact what we do, what we have in Guyana, other parts of the Caribbean? It seems as if we can really use that philosophy. One of the things I'm talking about, Gandhi in South Africa encouraged the Indians not to see themselves as Hindus or Muslims or Christians or Tamils, but as Indians together. And I think that message is very relevant today in a place like Guyana and Trinidad, for example. My question to you, Dr. Keshavjee, is Mahatma Gandhi is his name erupts rage in India. I've lived in India. My wife, I just came from India 2 days ago, as a matter of fact. And he's not a popular figure. I spoke with someone today, talking about Gandhi, and he's not respected in India, unfortunately. How do you see this? What do you think are the reasons for this? Why is the life of Gandhi not known to even to a lot of Indians? How do you sense this is going, and what can you, as a peacemaker, pushing for Gandhi's philosophy, how do you feel that this will impact the future of humankind in this world today?
Thank you, Mr. Bhagwan. I'm so happy to hear your question. Also, your surname is the name of God, which is lovely. What I wanted to say, and I'll try and answer as briefly as possible. I'll take your first question first. You know, I came to Trinidad about a few months ago. I'm thankful to Shalimar and Kumar and their family for encouraging me to come to the Caribbean. It was my first trip in the Caribbean. I mean, I have a nephew who's on the program here. He was going to join me, but unfortunately he couldn't. But I was trying to tell him that the Caribbean is a fascinating experience to me. And I spoke in the Caribbean, and I tried to explain that Gandhi doesn't belong to India. Gandhi is universal. Gandhi actually spoke to the human condition. It's no longer Gandhi the man, it's Gandhi the vision. And Gandhi's philosophy reached Africa again through the Caribbean, through people like George Padmore, through people like C.L.R. James. Not that they believed in Gandhi, but they inspired the Africanist movement. And people like Kwame Nkrumah, people like Jomo Kenyatta, people like Julius Nyerere, people like Kenneth Kaunda were inspired by Gandhi. So I think we need to let people in the Caribbean know that don't look at this Gandhi as an Indian and then George Padmore and C.L.R. James as black, theorists. Basically, the movement for freedom after the 19th century has been a movement that's been a colonial movement. People of all races and faiths have contributed to that. I mean, Dr. Du Bois in 1929 asked Mahatma Gandhi for how we should deal with the people in America who felt they were children of slaves. And Gandhi said, there's no shame to be a slave. There's a shame to be a slave owner. Now, this type of pieces of Gandhi's contribution in bridging the struggle for freedom should be taught in our schools. We should teach this in our schools. We should teach it to our children. We should make exhibitions and museums and writings and all that available to younger people. I mean, I didn't realize how rich the Trinidadian connection was with regard to Africa. But I was very happy, very lucky that I gave that presentation and I learned in the process. That's number one. Number two, you're talking about how is Gandhi seen in India today? Like any great leader in human history, at certain times people will appropriate the leader. At certain times they'll say that leader was the wrong leader. He was bad. He wasn't good for us. He didn't work for our country. Every human being in life is subject to multiple perspectives. And I would have thought, and I would be very happy if Gandhi was not only monumentalized in India, Gandhi has to be internalized. Gandhi as a vision must become part of life for Indians. Gandhi as a vision should be part of life for the Indians in the diaspora. The values, the ethics, the principles, the morality, the pluralistic vision, the kindness. We need to live those principles every day in our own families, in our own lives. And I think that there's a tremendous educational need in all these places to bring about that bridge to show that we cannot live in racialized politics. We have to live in a complementary society. And I think that when you read Gandhi's book, I hope that you will leave with that warm feeling in your heart that a man was able to do that. You're saying that my name is half Muslim and half Hindu. You know that an uncle of mine was taught the principles of our faith by Gandhi. And my grand-uncle had no problem in a Hindu teaching a Muslim boy. Never did he ask one question, what are you teaching him? But he told his son, you listen to your teacher, that's Bapuji. Until the day my uncle died, he actually never ate meat in deference to Mahatma Gandhi's teachings. So, you know, we need that spirit. We don't need the spirit to say, you're Hindu and I'm Muslim and this one is so and so and that's a Christian. I think we need to go beyond that. Okay, Shalima, I think I've answered that question. If there's anything more that I could say on what I've spoken, I'd be happy. But to also compliment you and all the team for a very lovely, lovely evening that makes one feel quite high. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, MK. I can't thank you enough. as well as our other speakers. And I want us to close today with what Cynthia Birch has just said. She says, you know, the last statement that you made sums it up. Gandhiji spoke to the human condition. And we need to remember that. And those of us who are here today to witness the excellent program, to witness the knowledge sharing, to witness the expertise coming from our three speakers, I think we all need to remember what we've been taught. Duty. Let's focus on duty, not so much on rights. And let's focus on the human condition. We need to play a part in improving it. I want to thank you all very much for attending today. And again, thank you so much to our speakers. I'll turn you over now to Shakira.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shalama, and thank you all for taking the time to attend and to participate. And as we said earlier, this meeting is being hosted by the Indo-Caribbean Cultural Center, and you can feel free to contact Dr. Kumar Mahabir for your books. And if you give a donation, your name will be placed on our poster and all promotional materials. Our topic next Sunday will be Indian indentureship, the opium poppy and their legacies in the Indian diaspora. So a very interesting topic to join us next Sunday with. So we want to thank everyone, our advisory and planning team led by Dr. Kumar Mahabir and all those who assisted in the production of this program. Please visit, like, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to see all our past recordings. I am Shakira Mohammed from Trinidad saying Dhanyavad.
Thank you, everybody. Sorry about I had really bad internet problems. I'm going to call the cable company, internet company, and see what can be done so this wouldn't happen again. But we have the recording on YouTube, so that should be a better version. If there's anybody who wants to say anything, please let us know.